The Church of England recently appointed a woman as the Archbishop of Canterbury. This is the first time in history this has been done. The Archbishop of Canterbury is the principal bishop and principal leader in the English Church. The English Church, of course, splitting away about 500 years ago from the Roman Catholic Church and establishing really its own leadership structure, with the head being the King or Queen of England. Now, I've had some people kind of mention this to me. What are my thoughts on this? And why historically Christianity has not ordained women as priests. So I want to give you 4 basic considerations here, and I'll play a clip from, believe it or not, Pope Francis that I think brings this together. It's actually very simple. The short answer, to make this very simple, is that the Catholic Church does not ordain women to be priests because we can't. And there's a simple reason for that, and we'll come back to that. But first, I want to point out it's simply true that in history, there have been times and places and cultures that women have been treated unfairly, I think. For example, in Victorian culture, there's a lot of beautiful things about Victorian culture, literature, some of the dresses, the buildings, it's gorgeous, right? But women were rather expected to be in the home, with very few career fields available to them in the same way that they were to men. There's a lot of cultural elements and developments that went into forming this, but the short answer is women weren't allowed in professorships to be lawyers in the same way that men were. And the result was women, unfortunately, were pressured to be married. Now, I think most people, not all, but most people should be married and have children and would be happier if this was their case. But women felt compelled to be married because they had no economic independence in many cases. Now, the old liberal order would say that capitalism freed women from this by putting them in the workforce, so to speak, by making economic paths for them in the capitalist liberal system, frankly. But I would even push back on that and say, right, but not every job that women have today is, I've complained that one of the things that bothered me most in my own life was driving to a Taco Bell at like 1 a.m. I forget if I was in college or what. And there was just some teenage girl, I think, working there, making minimum wage at super late, maybe midnight. And it was just depressing to me to see this. This wasn't progress. This wasn't, I don't think her life was made immensely better by capitalism run amok, if that makes sense. But there are valid critiques of various times and cultures in which women were treated unfairly, and I think that it was a good thing that women have less pressure to be married purely for economic reasons. Again, most people should be married, but women now can be professors, attorneys, scientists, engineers, all these things, and I think that's a good step. I don't think there's any problem with that. Now, bring it back to Christianity in the religious sphere. I think you could have the valid conversation about whether or not women should be theologians. Women can serve in various roles, perhaps even some leadership roles. Those are conversations that I think can be validly had. Some of the professors I've admired most, in fact, several of them have been women. And I'm grateful to have their influence in my life and to have learned from them. But why can't they be priests? The modern world tends to think of all social phenomena and relationships in terms of a power struggle. This is just seen as one more space in which women are arbitrarily barred for some kind of a class struggle between men and women, men being the oppressor class, women being the oppressed class. Again, I've seen lots of problems in religious spheres. I've seen women mistreated in religious realms. I've seen this. So I get the concern. But this, in terms of the priesthood, is just not another sphere, a space in which women are arbitrarily kept out in terms of a power struggle. I want to give you 4 reasons for that, just 4 considerations. One, the priesthood isn't really a position of power in the sense that we think of it in the modern world. It's primarily a position of servitude. As Bishop Barron once said, the priesthood exists to serve the laity. And having been a former Protestant minister, having done time serving people and dealing with all the things that come from that, I've watched so many priests that I know go through that probably with a little bit more. And I admire them. Those who are devout priests, who are serving Christ, serving the people of God, and dealing with so many things. These are servants more than powerful figures. So that's the first consideration. The priesthood doesn't fit into the sort of modern feminist, Marxist, etc. dynamic of a power class struggle. It's a position of servitude. But the second consideration, and this makes it, I think, just very simple. The Catholic Church, and I would say the Orthodox Church, we're simply following Christ, because Christianity, by definition, should follow its founder, Christ. And historically, from the scriptures, from the earlier church writings, we know that Christ ordained men, 12 men, and then those men ordained men, and those men ordained men, and you can track this back through history. And so we're simply following what Christ did, because we have to, if we're going to be truly Christian in that sense. But I'm going to argue with two final considerations that the Catholic Church isn't arbitrarily ordaining men to be bishops or to be priests, as Christ didn't arbitrarily choose men to be bishops or men to be priests. This is simply because men and women are different. This seems to be a controversial statement to some now, but it shouldn't be, and I think most of us around the world just know this intuitively. Men and women are different. So think about the word father. I'm a father, I have children, and I'm not a mother. So in the scriptures, Paul refers to himself as a spiritual father. And there's some sense in which a pastor should be a spiritual father. Perhaps not a biological father, but a spiritual father. But a man cannot be a spiritual mother, and a woman cannot be a spiritual father. And this is what it boils down to. Think about the sacrament of the Eucharist. One priest pointed this out so well, but he pointed out that the Eucharist is bread and wine. This is the feast that Christ left us. It's not sweet potatoes and Thanksgiving turkey. It's bread and wine. So try though he may, no bishop, no priest, no pastor of any sort can stand with the bread and the wine at the altar and pray over it and bless it and say the words of consecration and make this the feast that Christ gave us unless he's using bread and wine. My favorite meal is probably steak, and then it used to be steak and eggs, but then I tried steak, and I love Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So for some reason, I had the hankering to try Cinnamon Toast Crunch with my steak. Probably my favorite meal now. You should try it. Steak and Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Now, steak isn't lesser than bread and wine. It's good for you in many ways. It's got protein. It's not lesser than bread. It's good. Bread is good. Steak is good. But this isn't the feast that Christ gave us. So if a priest or a bishop or anyone else tries to perform the Mass, the Lord's Supper, with steak and Cinnamon Toast Crunch, he can talk and pray and say the words of consecration till he's blue in the face, but it could never be the Eucharist, the Thanksgiving meal, the feast that Christ gave us, that new Passover meal. Because there's a nature thing there. This is the same way in which a woman is good, is not lesser in many senses than the man. These are both human beings created in the image of God. It's not an intelligence issue. It's not a power issue. It's to do with the nature of the thing. Being a priest isn't what you do, it's who you are. It's a changing of the nature by the ordination that Christ instituted 2,000 years ago. So as Christians, we believe that the ordination, the holy orders, is not a right. It's a privilege. It's a calling that is not owed to anyone. But those who are called and those who are ordained in the way that Christ established, they become priests. But the same way in which steak and Cinnamon Toast Crunch can't become the Eucharist, a woman really can't become, by nature, a priest, any more than I can become a mother. We have our own little bit of cultural bias that we read into these conversations, so be aware of that. But more importantly, in historic Christianity, women have held extremely high places of honor. From female doctors of the church in Catholicism to saints, sort of just regular everyday saints who give their lives to God in its fullness, and God uses them to change the world. This has happened historically, and they're worthy of honor. To the Lord's mother herself, she is honored above any priest that I know, except for our high priest, Jesus Christ. She is worthy of honor. She is, if Christ is the king, she is the queen. And she is worthy of honor. And if Christianity is true, she has real power. So I think it would be unfair and unwise to say that Christianity universally, unilaterally, is just trying to keep women out of positions of power. That's just absolutely not true. John Henry Newman was a convert from the Anglican Church to the Catholic Church. He was a good theologian, but he talked about something called the development of doctrine. Now, as a Protestant studying theology, I knew quite well that I had to believe in something like development of doctrine. The idea that there is something true and good that Christ gave us in the deposit of faith, and that over time, the Holy Spirit guides the church to unpack it, to develop it, to give us the nomenclature and language that we use about the Holy Trinity, for example. The seed, the idea, the doctrine, the belief is found in the deposit of faith, but sure, the nomenclature we use is developed later. It's totally fine, and I think God knew what he was doing there. Many examples of this. But in modernity and postmodernity, there's a danger in saying that we are reading our cultural assumptions about gender, power struggles, class dynamics, maybe some issues with some Southern Baptist church or Victorian culture or anything, and reading that back into the conversation about women in ministry. I think this is exactly what's happening. So decent people, perhaps the new Archbishop of Canterbury is perhaps a decent, lovely person. She seems to be. It could be that we're reading our cultural assumptions into that conversation, and I would say that we are. Because there's a danger, I think, in the difference between development of doctrine and departure from sound doctrine. And with respect to the good things about English history or my own country, I would say that this is not a development. This is a departure from what Christ gave us and that deep understanding of human nature.
For a little girl growing up Catholic today, will she ever have the opportunity to be a deacon and participate as a clergy member in the church?
No.
In our desire to be nice and inclusive, sometimes we discard truth, and that's not kind. It's not kind to any of us in the end. Whoever you are, whether you're an Anglican or a Catholic or a Baptist or an atheist or a Buddhist or a Muslim, I hope you know your life matters. God proved it on the cross. Someone somewhere loves you, so don't forget that. No matter how dark things get, life's worth living. Please pray for me. I'm praying for all of you. God bless.